After Neuchâtel in New York, we now go to Paris. Hello, Frédéric Martel.
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour. You are a writer, a journalist, an observer of our society. You hold a PhD in social sciences and 4 master's degrees in law, political science, philosophy, and social science. You are currently professor of creative economies, I'll get it right, at the Zurich University of the Arts and director of the Zurich Center for Creative Economies. You have published several books. The latest one, In the Closet of the Vatican, was a New York Times bestseller. So what are your thoughts on what you've heard today and on this troubling period we're going through?
So first of all, bonjour, bonjour à tous. Thank you for invited me. I follow a few discussions, especially the future trends in creative technology, the future of cultural experiences, also the keynote speeches, and I was extremely interested because at least it was very positive. I follow in France and also in Switzerland many discussions about the arts, and in general, it's a very sad pictures of the situation of today, which is, of course, the case. But speaking about speaking about the new technology tools and so on, gives hope, and that's a good thing. However, I have done 3 and actually 4 studies that you can find online if you go to the Zurich Center of Creative Economy, and then there is a little circle, and you click and you have the 4 studies that we have published in French, in English, and in German about the current situation on cultural creativity, and we call it the cultural depression. However, so our studies are, of course, extremely shows a sector that is really in trouble. And I will add that what we have done as a research in the spring, it was mainly done with data and also a few qualitative research. We interviewed people in several institutions around the world. The situation was pretty difficult, but I would say today, which is 6 months later, the situation is even worse. And I would like to summarize a bit what we have found, and also finish with a few, I wouldn't say solutions, but I think hope elements. The main difference between the spring and now, given the fact that we are again in a kind of lockdown, it's a case in Germany, in Switzerland, in France, and in other countries, is that in the spring, in a way, people, it was an exceptional moment, but people had a lot of hope to try new things, to be innovative. We didn't know, personally, I did not know what was Zoom at that time. It was less than 10 million people around the world using Zoom. And suddenly, in a few weeks, in March and April, more than 200 million people went to Zoom and used Zoom. And so we were ready for innovation, for new tools. We learned the way to teach as professors, and students learned to follow their professor on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams, on Google Meet. We were also in museum theater extremely positive about the new tools, how you put online our content, and how things can be, in a way, it was a good moment to innovate. 6 months after that, the situation is much more sad. Of course, we still are doing these kind of things, but people are extremely frustrated because the economic trouble of the spring are now an economic disaster. And this disaster has 3 main elements. The first element is basically the same depression, the same bad situation that all the economics elements, all the big businesses have. So the arts are in this first situation the same than the other one. We cannot go to theater because there is the lockdown. There is not enough possibilities to create. The theater, the movie theater are closed and so on. So in this first crisis, the arts are vulnerable as, I would say, a large part of the economics. The second element is that the creativity and the creative arts are themselves different than the rest of the economy. For example, it's a mix of public and private money. It is a sector, the creative sector, where small businesses and middle-sized businesses are extremely numerous, much more than in the overall society. It's also a place, a sector where self-employment are higher, much higher than in the other sectors. And it's also a place where creativity needs time. And, you know, there is a very simple rules for a creator. You need to make money on something a bit secure. Either it's you wait tables in a restaurant, or you are professor in a university, to be able to find time to create. So you use the other part of your money, you use a part of your job and salary to take the time to create, to find your own voice, because creativity, innovation, writings needs time. And so because of that, the singularity, and that's the second element, the singularity of the sector is it much more than the rest of the society. So as an artist, as an art sector, we are it first like everybody else, but we also are eaten with specificity of our sector. And then there is the third element. The third element is that the creative sector, the cultural sector, is also extremely divided in subsectors. And all of these sectors have been affected and hit by the depression and by the COVID-19 consequences differently than even the cultural sector. And this is why we need to go a little bit in the details very quickly. Basically, I don't want to make a class here, you know, and all that is on our website, but basically the art sector is divided in a dozen subsectors. Either will be music, cinema, would be visual arts, and so on. And so these different sectors are hit very differently by the COVID-19 and its consequences. And first of all, it's immediately, but also on the long run. And that's also a very singular thing of the creative sectors. You are hit because the theater is closed, because you cannot go to see a movie in a movie theater, but the production of the movie theater, the way you try out plays, for example, before going to the theater, is also it. So it means for recovering, it is, even if when you have the theater out, open again. We have seen that with the movie theater this summer. That's a very bad moment, because people don't go too much on theater, because, for example, blockbusters have been postponed for the spring 2021, and they might be even for later. So the first element on this singularity is the time. And we already have some data. By the way, we don't have a lot of data right now, but we have seen, for example, in the US, American for the Arts have evaluated that the first COVID lockdown cost $5 billion only for the arts. It means non-profit arts. $5 billion, which means more than $40,000 for all institutions. And $40,000 for a very little institution is a lot. It's a lot of money that they have lost. We also have seen that in philanthropy, the consequences are very bad. First of all, for the very big philanthropic organization like the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller, and what we call the big foundation, but also for the very little one and all the online foundation like the new tools like Patreon, TP, My Major Company, and all of them are affected. I don't want to be too long on the different elements because there are so many challenges, and we have done that in our study number 2 published on the Zurich Center for Creative Economy that you can find. But basically, I would say the people that try to find new tools and new ways were extremely innovative in the spring. Again, this so-called we called logo meaning local outdoor. So for example, you have people coming to a place for an event, and global online. So it means you don't have people from outside, but you still have a bit of the people from the local place. So this kind of logo new model, which is a double model hybrid, which is a part of people being physically in an event and the other globally online, were a lot tried. And I listened just before the president of the Cannes Festival, and he was mentioning what they tried in this direction. But the overall problem for all these new experiences, whatever it's in music, in live events, in festival, in music tours, and so on, are and is mainly the problem of the economic model, how you make money of that. We have seen some creativity with tools like the video games like Twitch and this kind of models that try to find an economic models, but that's pretty much the beginning of that. Of course, at the same time, you have also, and we have to not to underestimate that, some sector that benefits, of course, a lot by the COVID and the lockdown. It's of course the case with Netflix, probably plus 20 million more subscriptors in a few during the first lockdown, and also a lot of progression and multiplication of with Amazon and even Apple and Twitch, as I mentioned before, Zoom and so on. Even though some big giants of the internet doesn't succeed well, typically Uber is in trouble, Airbnb is dead right now, so they have to find their new models. Kayak, Expedia are in big trouble, and so on and so forth. I would like to add also another example. It's how company, especially the big international rights company that give back to the musician, for example, money, are also affected. That's the case with the GEMA in Germany, SOCAN in Canada, PRS in UK, or SACEM in France, because they collect the money now and they will reverse the money in 1 or 2 years to the musician, for example. But now they don't collect any money. So you have the crisis, the big crisis now, but you will have also the crisis next year and maybe the year after, because of the delay between the moment when you collect the money and the moment where you pay to the people. I would like to finish this quick, and I'm really sorry, the memo and the note I mentioned are 40 or 50 page long, so it's just a very quick summarize what I'm saying right now, and I invite you again to look at our research if you are interested. But I would like to finish with just a reminder. When I began to work on this sector crisis, I thought, is it totally new, or did we have in the past some other, I would say, moment when the arts were in trouble? And so I look at the history, and in fact, I find out that what we are living in now, the problem we have now, we have found this kind of same situation, basically a bit of the century ago. And when was that? It was during the Great Depression, mainly mainly in the US, but also in Europe, what we could call the first cultural depression. And to remember on that, in the US, it was after the crisis in 1929. You remember, for example, if you have read *The Grape of Wrath* by John Steinbeck, how the world was destroyed and how people left their house and to find jobs and then President Roosevelt was elected, and we know we are still counting about the vote in the US right now. And by the way, Biden is better in Nevada and even in Pennsylvania right now, so that's pretty good. So when Roosevelt was appointed, he said in his famous speech in 1933, in March 1933, that he will action now, he said. And he said also, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. You remember these two very famous sentences. And he did it. He did it very quickly. He acted in favor of the arts. During what we call the first New Deal in 1933, 1934, he created relief jobs in a very large number, and they affected the artists. It was not a cultural policy. And Roosevelt was pretty clear about that. Our goal was employment, was labor. That was his only goal. But he answered a question of, his advisor. I remember when I studied this period, I did also my PhD on that. Advisor said to Roosevelt, the painters and the musicians are in big trouble. What can we do, President? And Roosevelt, he was not interested by the arts. He was interested in stamps and little boat. So culture was not for him. No music, no theater, nothing. But he said, right, come on. If they are painter, they might just paint. We need to find time and place and money for them to paint. And the way he built a cultural policy based on the situation that was desperate was mainly a very energetic one, just made on common ground. If they are painters, they can paint. We are going to find places for them. And during the second New Deal, after 1935, he created an administration, the so-called WPA, Work Progress Administration, that was run by Henry Hopkins, and they call it Federal One. And this Federal One created many programs for the writers, for the arts, for the musician, for the movie, for dance. They call it Federal Writers Project, Federal Arts Projects, and so on. And many artists, from Saul Bellow to Nelson Algren and Robert Frost in literature, from Mark Rothko and Jackson Pollock in the arts, from John Huston, Nicola Ray, or Joseph Losey in the movie sector, Aaron Copland in music, and the famous, theater project with more than 13,000 actors that were helped by the government, and 800 plays that were created during that time. And it was the beginning of Arthur Miller. Orson Welles did Macbeth and Jules Caesar for the Federal Theater Project, and so on and so on. So they created an energy. They put a lot of money to regenerate the arts in the US after the Great Depression. It was not only, and I'm going to finish with that, it was not only to pay artists or to make them finding an employment. The reason why Roosevelt did that with Harry Hopkins and also a famous woman called Ali Flanagan, she was in charge of the Federal Theater Project. The idea was to create art programs, not just for the artist. But if you have artists coming, acting, working, you will be able to recreate some kind of energy and positive, I would say, involvement of the society at large. So the artists were important to bring them back to work, because then society will find back optimism, and they will find back a kind of reason to survive. And it did work that way, even though the program were banned and destroyed with the war in 1941. And then, of course, other projects were created. But, I wanted to finish with this this reminder of what has been done after a very big crisis that was for all society, but of the artist, and how you use artists to try to save the problem of the overall society. Thank you, and I can answer a few questions or comments.
So actually, unfortunately, we won't have time
We don't have, okay.
for questions or comments, but I want to thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to thank you for especially putting culture back in the center of things, of our society. It is what makes our society so full of quality and, like you said, so full of optimism. Thank you very much, Frédéric
And
Martel.
just the last comment, I decided to have this image behind me, and that was the moment when the jazzmen were together to recreate an energy with they were very young at that time, and it's a famous photo of precisely that kind of moment.
Well, I hope we managed to do some of that today, even though it was digital. Thank you very much. Au revoir, Frédéric Martel. Thank you.